Today I wanted to perform one of Beethoven's most well-known pieces, and in fact it's probably one of the most well-known pieces that has ever been written for the piano. When many people think of the piano, they think of this piece of music, which is of course Fur Elise, which is commonly attributed to, it's pretty much always attributed to Beethoven. But despite the fact that it's such a well-known piece and practically every beginner pianist learns this piece, at least here in Western culture, in America and Europe and many other places, even though so many beginners learn this piece, and for many people it's one of the first real pieces they learn to play on the piano, this piece is actually shrouded in a surprising amount of mystery. The piece is rumored to have been found in Beethoven's desk after his passing, and it wasn't actually signed by Beethoven. It simply had at the top of the score, Fur Elise. And many people don't exactly know who this Elise was. Some people say that in fact her name wasn't actually Elise, and the name became Elise through translation, and in fact it was originally Therese or Teresa or something like that. But who was this Elise or Teresa or whatever her name exactly was? No one really knows. Why was this piece written? And was it in fact written by Beethoven? Even though it definitely is, of course, a classical piece, it's a little bit different than most of Beethoven's other works, and so as a result of that, many people kind of speculate perhaps it wasn't written by Beethoven, perhaps it was written by someone else. He had the sheet music, put it in his desk, and the rest is history. But there's a number of different theories about why the piece was written, who it was written for. Some people believe that this was a practice piece written for a student of Beethoven's named Elise, and other people believe that Elise was a romantic interest of his, and there was some very interesting theories and speculations about why the piece is so simple in one spot and so challenging in another spot with the fast runs and stuff. There's very interesting theories surrounding that. But whatever the case may be, Fur Elise is a very famous piece, and it's also a very beautiful piece, and it's a very good piece for beginners to learn because it teaches how to play slow and how to play quiet, but also how to play fast and crisp, all in one piece, and it's a really, really cool piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the piece for you right now, and then after I play that, I'm going to bring out the sheet music and just kind of talk about some of the things that people will make mistakes on when they're playing the piece, and some things to watch out for if you're going to go learn the piece yourself. If you never have or you want to take another look at it, I just want to give you some helpful pointers on things to watch out for when you are learning the piece and when you are performing the piece. But without any further ado, let me get into playing Fur Elise, one of the most cliche piano pieces of all time. I'm going to be playing it today, and hopefully you guys enjoy. So hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing Fur Elise being played on this piano. I think it sounds absolutely wonderful, and it's a really, really beautiful piece. There's a number of different ways that people like to play it. Some people play it faster than I did. Some people even play it a little bit slower. And there's a number of different ways people will interpret various sections, and they'll play certain sections louder or slower or faster or something than I did. There's a number of different ways people like to interpret it, but that's how I interpreted the piece. It's pretty much the same as everyone else, but I put my own slight little twist on it. Didn't change anything in the music, of course, but that's just kind of how I interpreted the piece, and hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing it. But now, let me bring out the sheet music and let me talk to you about it and show you guys some of the things that you might want to watch out for if you are going to be learning the piece. And yeah, let's do it. One thing I wanted to mention here is that there will be a copy of the sheet music that you can download in the description of this video. It's completely free, and I think you just click on the link and wait 15 seconds to download it or something. It's on the IMSLP website, and it's the exact same sheet music I'm using here, which I believe is a copy of like a very old version of the sheet music, which is of course why it would be in the public domain. And so it's the exact same sheet music I'm using here, so all the page numbers and lines and all that will be the same, and it will be 3 pages like my version here is. There are 3 pages here. So if you have your own version of the sheet music, you can go ahead and use that if you want, or you can use this version if you don't have your own version already. I just wanted to mention that before I got into this. Now, a few of the things that I wanted to mention is, first of all, there's a lot of different ways that people will play the piece. Some versions of this piece that you can go listen to online, people will play the piece like this. And then other people will play it like very, very slowly. Other people play it fast, other people play it slow. I'm a little bit somewhere in the middle there. And kind of oddly, there's no exact tempo marking. It says poco moto, but there's no tempo marking. It doesn't say adagio or andante or any tempo marking, and there's no metronome beat per minute marked on the sheet music either. And for the dynamics and expression, at the beginning of the piece, there is a pianissimo marking, and there's some pedal markings, and that's about it. I think there's another pianissimo marking somewhere else in the piece. But for expression, that's all that's written in the sheet music, so that kind of gives a lot of people the ability to kind of do pretty much whatever they want within the realm of, you know, logical ability with the piece. So some people will kind of play it slower, other people will play it faster, some people play it louder in other sections than others. So there is a bit of freedom that you have with this piece, and I like to kind of give it a very expressive feel, a very gentle and a very elegant feel, which of course the piece just kind of has by nature. But a few of the things I wanted to mention that you should definitely focus on, that you should be doing a certain way in this piece, is the number of, I don't really know what you call them, I guess they're kind of like the slow trill. It's what the piece opens up with. That little motif that repeats so many times throughout the piece. It's very important to make sure that you do the correct amount of those at the right time in the piece. And there's 2 different variations of that. There's the one that the piece opens up with, which is 3 repetitions of that. I'm just going to call it a slow trill. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then it goes on. And then there's also another version that plays 6 of those, and that's always after that part. So after you play that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you always want to be making sure that you're doing the proper amount of those. It's very easy to do the wrong amount, because playing 6 of those feels very repetitive, and it's like, am I doing too many? This feels like too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I completely messed that up there, but you know what I mean. It feels kind of repetitive, so you want to make sure that you're doing 6 of those there after the arpeggio kind of thing with the octaves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then go on to the rest of the piece. And then here, 1, 2, 3. Just like that. So that's how that section of the piece works. The little, again, I'm going to call it a slow trill there. You want to do 3, you want to play 3 E's in there. So 1 E, 2, 3. And then in the part after the arpeggio there, you want to do 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's always either 3 or 6. So when you're playing this piece, when you're practicing it at home, you can probably count it out loud like I just did there. And if you're performing it for friends or just as a practice performance at home or for a recital, you can always count that out in your head, or even just kind of mouth out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 when you're performing the piece. Another thing I wanted to mention here is the second section here that's it's the second section of the piece here that goes like this. You want to make sure that all those fast notes, like that one I just ended up there on, you want to make sure that all of those sound really, really crisp. And in the sheet music, it doesn't say to do pedal throughout this whole section. Now, I think that not doing pedal in the entire section sounds kind of dry, like this. So I do pedal throughout most of that first line. I don't do it on these chords too much. And then here, I don't do any pedal for that really fast run there. Because you want that to be very, very crisp. And I think in another version of my sheet music that I used years ago when I had a teacher who was teaching me this piece, it actually had that section circled and it said clean next to it. So the teacher was telling me to specifically make sure to play that section clean. And I think it also said something similar for this other section here. So you want to make sure you're playing that section very clean and very crisply, and make sure not to play the pedal for that one section. Make it nice and clean like that. And then this section here, no pedal for this. Whoops, I messed up there. And then at the end here, you can apply the pedal again. Another thing people will often like to do in this second section of the piece is really take huge liberties with the timing. I know some performances of it you will hear. At the beginning here, people will go like this. They'll go from playing the piece at the normal tempo here to just like this. I'm exaggerating slightly, but really not that much. And you don't want to, you can kind of drag out those chords a little bit, because they sound kind of cool, but you don't want to drag them out too much, because they are 16th notes after all. If they were 8th notes or something, you could drag them out longer, but that's how I like to play them. I give it a little bit of a pause at the end before moving on to the next section of the piece, but you don't want to drag it out too much, at least in my opinion, because it just kind of sounds all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, everything's changing. People will actually play it like that, and I'm not really too big of a fan of that. I like to keep the tempo a little bit more close to what is written on the sheet music. Like that. And you also don't want to play the rest of the piece too fast according to this section, because the section there that I was playing earlier, this part, those are 30-second notes, and so what a lot of people do will often, they'll play the rest of the piece kind of quickly, like say this. Right? And then when they get to the second section here, they'll just do this. I'm exaggerating a bit, but this is what people often do. They'll slow down the second section of the piece so that they're doing it slow enough to be able to do the 30-second notes at the right time. And other people will play the second section of it at the right tempo according to the rest of the piece, but then when the 30-second notes come along, they'll slow it way down so that they're able to play all the right notes. So when you're practicing on this, you want to make sure that you're not doing that, and that is where the metronome comes in handy. You might have seen it sitting on the bench there. But this is where the metronome comes in handy. So you're going to want to figure out the tempo that you can play the 30-second notes at. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, that is at 100. And if that's too fast, I'll slow it down. So let's see. Let's go a little bit slower, because a beginner who's just learning this piece might not be able to do it that fast. Let's try 80. Whoops, So let's say that you're able to do it at 80 accurately, but then you can play the rest of the piece much faster. What you want to be doing is playing the whole piece and practicing the whole piece at 80 beats per minute, so that when you come down to here, you're playing it at the right tempo according to the metronome, and that is going to be really rather slow. So when you're practicing it, you're going to want to make sure that you're playing the rest of the piece at the right tempo. I'm just going to skip to the second section here. So that when you come to the 30-second notes, you can do them at the right tempo according to the rest of the piece, and you're not breaking time radically to be able to do it. Just like that. So that's one thing that you're going to want to make sure you're doing You don't want to radically break the time signature there when you're performing the piece to be able to do the 30-second notes. Now, if you're playing them a little bit faster than the rest of the piece or a little bit slower, that's okay, but you don't want to go from playing the piece at a certain tempo to radically changing the tempo so that you're able to do the 30-second notes. That's something very important. I also remember my teacher saying that about this piece and other pieces as well, if there's a certain section of the piece that's giving you a hard time, you don't want to play the rest of the piece at a certain tempo and then slow down to be able to do your treble section. You want to slow the rest of the piece down to be able to do your treble section at the right speed according to the rest of the sheet music. That's very important. Whoops. That is annoying. The music desk likes to do that. It's not great for holding up single sheets of paper, and once they start sliding, there's nothing that keeps them from sliding away. So now on the next page here, this is the second page, right? Yeah, this is the second page of the piece. So on the second page here, there's not a whole lot because it does repeat that motif from earlier, you know, the whole. All that gets repeated again. And then we come down here to the section that has the repeated notes. This is kind of like the C section of the piece. It's the third kind of motif section of the piece here, this part. And you want to make sure that your left hand notes are accurate, and you also want to make sure that you're playing the left hand note with different fingers each time, because that really makes it a lot easier to play, and it just makes it easier to play. Oddly enough, this sheet music doesn't have any fingering markings whatsoever, but usually it will say like 3-2-1, 3-2-1 on these notes for the first few, just to kind of give you the idea that, hey, you're supposed to be changing fingers here. Because if you don't, you can do it, but it also looks kind of silly. When you get to the chords here, these fifths and stuff, you can't really change fingers, so you have to use the same ones. But then when you get back here, you're going to want to be doing different fingering, like so. Just like that. So that's another part that you'd probably want to practice with the metronome. Play it nice and slow and make sure that you're getting every single note there of the left hand to sound, and that it's nice and accurate, and you're playing each one with a different finger. This is probably just another spot that some people might have trouble with. I wanted to talk about that. Now on the third page here is where many people will probably have trouble, and that's with the triplet section. Now one thing that I've heard people do, and it's very fun to do, is to play the triplet section way faster than the rest of the piece. So let's say you're playing the rest of the piece here like this. Let's say you've got, and then you just go. And then slow way down back to the beginning. That is very fun to do. Like, seriously, it's really fun to do, but that's not exactly proper. I like to keep the timing of these triplets a little bit more close to the original tempo. I think I probably did speed them up a little bit in my performance, but I wanted to keep them pretty close to the original timing. And again, that's another spot where the metronome will come in handy for you. Let's put it at 100 now. So when you're playing the piece, you'd want to go. Just like so, to kind of keep the timing nice and accurate and make sure that you're doing the timing of the triplets correctly. Now the chromatic scale there at the end is also in triplets, but when you're playing it at full tempo, it really doesn't sound like triplets, but when you are playing it with the metronome, you of course would want to play it as triplets. I kind of went past where it's supposed to end there, but you want to make sure that you're doing that with triplets. And when you're performing the piece, a lot of people like to do a ritardando somewhere in the triplet section, usually after the chromatic scale begins. And some people like to start it really early and just slow the whole chromatic section way down. But it doesn't actually say to put a ritardando anywhere in the music, but also my teachers told me to do a ritardando, but they said to do it kind of at the end, like on this first measure here of the third line. So that would mean the chromatic scale section would go like this. Same tempo, slow down right there. You can slow it down a little bit beforehand, but you don't want to take the chromatic scale, you don't want to take the triplet section, you know, this part. The part that's outlining the A minor chord there. You don't want to take that at one tempo and then all of a sudden have the chromatic scale section be a whole nother tempo, like, for example, this. That to me sounds a bit strange and it's just kind of like all of a sudden changing tempos, but I like it when the chromatic scale is more in line with the rest of the tempo of the rest of the music. And then slow down and resume the old motif from the beginning of the music. And from here on out, the piece is really straightforward. I skipped just to the end, so I'd end the piece. But that is the rest of the piece. And after you get done with the chromatic scale section, the rest of the piece is really simple. What's kind of cool about this piece is since it repeats a lot, once you learn, say, the first 3.5 lines, you know like a good 2/3 of the piece, which is awesome. So then once you know the first 3.5 lines, which are the simplest parts of the piece, and once you get the whole 3 parts of the trill and the whole, the whole 6 parts of the trill after this part done, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you master that and you're able to do that reliably every time, and you know that first section, you know 2/3 of the piece, which is really, really awesome. Actually, yeah, pretty much like 2/3 of the piece. And then all you have to learn is the section that we've already talked about, which is this one. You have to learn that one. And then, of course, you have to learn the section there with the repeated notes over here on the second page. All my pages are out of order here, but on the second page here, this is the other part you have to learn. And there goes your sheet music again. But so once you learn the first 3 lines of the piece, you already know a whole lot of the piece, and then you just have to learn the section here, the second section, as well as the third section. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, give you guys a little bit of an overview of Fur Elise and show you guys some of the things that you'd want to avoid doing and some of the things you'd want to watch out for. Again, with the chromatic scale section, you definitely would want to practice that with the metronome. I've already demoed the metronome here, but you'd want to practice the chromatic scale there with the metronome as well to really make sure you're playing all the right notes and you're playing them at the right timing and with the right fingering. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the little, not really a tutorial, but kind of like a walkthrough of the piece and just kind of showing you what parts that you should watch out for and what parts people will often make mistakes on and things like that. So if you've made it this far along in the video, I hopefully you have enjoyed it and hopefully enjoyed the performance part of it as well. I wanted to combine the performance and the tutorial for this piece into one video because the piece is kind of long and it's also kind of repetitive, and I don't think that a standalone tutorial video would have been all that interesting and exciting because a lot of the piece repeats and all that stuff. So I just kind of wanted to talk about the tutorial and how to play the piece just along with playing the piece, just because I thought that would fit better. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and if you want, you can go check out my channel. I've got lots of cool videos of pianos, organs, and other cool keyboard instruments, as well as lots of other performances on this piano. So if you want to go check any of that out, you can, and if you do that, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.